So what I'm going to talk about today is harmony. And I'm going to give you an example of two songs that were written with a melody consisting of one note. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to demonstrate how, even with a single note, you can create something that's very interesting and, dare I say, kind of enlivening. First song is the One Note Samba.
Purposefully showing off the mileage you can get from one melody note.
This is just a little samba built upon a single note. Other notes are bound to follow, but the root is still that note.
Okay, here's
Now
another
the
note.
new one is the consequence of the one we've just been through, as I'm bound to be the unavoidable consequence of you.
The wonderful thing about it is that it's just a single note and it's given life by all of the chords that are happening underneath it. And I'm going to give you another example. This is a song by Taylor Swift, who apparently has a reputation for writing one-note melodies.
Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods? Are we in the clear yet? Are we in the clear yet? Are we in the clear yet? In the clear yet? Good. Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods? Are we in the clear yet? Are we in the clear yet? Are we in the clear yet? In the clear yet?
So, interesting, right? I can't say that I find the melody that appealing, but if we go back, we see at the beginning, we have this C chord, and then the same notes over a G chord, and then the same notes over an A minor chord, and the same notes over an F chord, and they all work. So how does that happen? The whole notion of chords moving behind something raises the question as to what is a chord, and why do some chords work and others don't? And that leads us to the question of, what kind of chords are there, and why are some chords the way they are, and so on. And that leads to the whole question about major scales and minor scales. And to talk about major and minor scales, we actually have to talk about musical intervals. And I know that the beginning of this is going to be a little bit dry, but actually toward the end, it gets pretty fun. So we're going to talk about musical intervals, first of all. If you have a keyboard, okay, so I'm going to start down here. Right, so that's the C major scale. It's all white notes, although they all look black here. But you'll notice between the C and the D, there's a black note. Between the D and the E, there's a black note. Between the E and the F, no black note. Between the F and the G, there's a black note. G to A, there's a black note. From A to B, there's a black note. And B to C, no black notes. We call two notes with a note in between a tone. Right? If it were a semitone, it would sound like this. The semitone is the smallest interval we have in music, and an interval is a gap between two notes. And that's how we count all of the gaps that make up scales and chords. So we have a tone here and a tone here, and between E and F, a semitone, and then a tone, a tone, a tone, and a semitone, right? So there's that formula: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So as I was saying, the interval called a minor second is one semitone, and a major second is two semitones, or what we call a tone. Okay. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and they're marked as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. This is kind of the generic major scale. Between do and re is a tone, re to mi is a tone, mi to fa is a semitone, fa to so is a tone, so to la is a tone, la to ti is a tone, and ti to do is a semitone. That is, every major scale is based on this. Now, here's an interesting thing. If we take that little diagram and we move it let's say we're going to start on G. Instead, let's look at the notes we have. So G is do, A is re, B is mi, C is fa, D is so, E is la, and then when we get to T, we're going to have to include a black note. That's going to be F sharp because we want the notes to be sequential letters. So it's going to be D, E, F something rather than G something because the last note is do again, it's G. Okay, so we've gone from a scale that was all white notes to a scale that has a black note, and the black note is introduced here on the T. If we move that down again and make do D, it doesn't fit quite as well, I have to say, but then D is do, re is E, and then we keep the F sharp that we added in the last scale for me, and then G is fa, A is so, B is la, and C sharp is T, and then we have do again. So again, the new sharp is introduced on the T. And that's always the case when you're going into more and more sharp scales. So this scale has two black notes, the F sharp and the C sharp. And when we start writing those down, we fit them at the beginning of a line, a staff, and mark them right beside the treble clef. And that lets us know what the key is. If it's two sharps, we know we're in the scale of D. If it's one sharp, we know we're in the scale of G. If there are no sharps or flats, we're in C. And then we have flat scales as well. Let's say do is F. Okay, so F is do, G is re, A is actually mi, fa is actually B flat because we want it to be B something because B comes after A, B flat, and then C is so, and D is la, E is T, and F is do again. So this time, our new black note was introduced on the fourth note of the scale, right? And it's, so now we have a scale with one flat, F. There's a question about like why these scales, some scales have one sharp, some have two, and is there some kind of order that they happen in? Well, if you look from our first scale was in C, we're going to count up semitones here. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 semitones, right? So that takes us to G. And that's the scale that have one sharp. And then if we count up 7 more semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's the scale with 2 sharps. And one would imagine that if we count up 7 more semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we would come to a scale with 3 sharps. And that is in fact the case. And going the other way, if we count down 7 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we come to the scale of F, which has one flat. And you would think that if we keep going in the same direction, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we come to a scale called B flat, which has 2 flats, and so on. So they go in opposite directions. Then in the sharp scales, the new sharp is always on T. And in the flat scales, the new flat is always on Fa. And this is called the circle of fifths. And why is it called the circle of fifths? Because there are 5 notes in the scale from C to G, 5 notes in the scale from G to D, right? And so that interval, the perfect fifth, it's called, it has 7 semitones. I should say all of the intervals between a minor second and an octave have a name, but we don't have to learn all the names today because it's just like too much, right? So now the next question is, what's a chord? All right, so let's go back to the scale we were in, C. A chord consists of 3 notes at least 3 notes. It can be more than that, but if there are fewer than 3, it's not a chord. And the most basic form of a chord is major and minor. And a major scale consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones and 1, 2, 3 semitones. So that's 4 semitones is called a major third, and 3 semitones is called a minor third. So a major chord sounds like this. And so if we take those 3 notes, that's C, D, E, and G, we move that up 1 degree in the scale, we have another chord that consists of D, F, and A. And you notice that one sounds different. So let's look at that. Let's analyze how it's different. Okay, so the first note is D, E, F, E flat, E, and F. So that's 1, 2, 3 semitones. And the second 2 notes are go from the F and the A. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones. That's the reverse of the other one, D to F. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. This is called a minor chord, and minor third, major third. Now, I was just curious about whether this is information which is already known to you. Is this stuff you're already familiar with?
Yes, but I have a question. What's the difference between sharp scales and flat scales?
The only difference is where they occur on the keyboard. They sound exactly the same. In other words, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do sounds the same wherever you start it.
So what is there a reason for thinking of it in that different way?
Oh, it has to do with the history of the keyboard, actually, and the development of the whole major scale as a phenomenon. You know, when people were experimenting with music in the 1300s and so on, they were trying to come up with a consistent way of writing music down and also playing it. And there were a whole bunch of different inventions of keyboards that would allow people to play tunes on them. But what happened was that they would tune a set of strings one way, and then they'd play a scale on it, and they'd try to play the same scale starting from somewhere else, and it would sound really horrible and out of tune. That was because they hadn't yet invented a system where all semitones were equal. And once they did that, you could lay the major scale over it and start anywhere. And that is what is called the tempered scale. The tempered scale gives us a keyboard with 7 white notes and 5 black notes. And that came into focus in the late 1500s. And then the nomenclature of calling one of those notes C and so on came in not that long after that, right? So it's been an evolution in time. And it just turns out that when you impose the structure of a major scale on that particular keyboard, you end up with a certain combination of white and black notes. And that's what we call the keys. And so depending on the direction you're going in, the keys can have 2 different names, right? You can call a black note the sharp of the note to the left of it, or the flat of the note to the right of it. We were talking about the makeup of these chords. And now we now have the major and minor chords. And let's see what that gives us in terms of our keyboard. So here's C, E, G, and D, F, A. So C, E, G is a major chord, D, F, A is a minor chord. How about E, G, B? Can anyone tell me what that is?
I think it's minor.
Yes, it is. And that's because from E to G is minor third, G to B is major third, right? And then we have F chord, major or minor? It's a major chord, yep. And how about this one?
Major.
Major. Now here's a weird one, and to show you this, I'm going to have to take you a little bit to the right here. What is this one?
It's diminished.
Diminished.
It's diminished. Yes, good answer. So, and that's because this is a minor third, and so is that. Right. So a diminished chord is minor third, and this doesn't occur in the major scale, although it does in the harmonic minor. But there's also a chord called an augmented chord, which looks like this, which consists of major third, major third. You would think, you know, there being so many possibilities, that would have to be one of them. Okay. So let's look at that sequence we had again, because this is very important. We had a major chord, minor chord, major chord, major chord, minor chord, diminished chord, yuck, and again major chord, right? So just going over it quickly, it's major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. This is the root of all harmony. And the interesting thing about it is that there are 3 major chords in this scale. F and the G. And these chords are numbered. So this is the 1 chord, the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 again, right? So the major chords are 1, 4, and 5. And now I'm going to take you on a little journey, because the 1, the 4, and the 5 are the most popular chords in all pop music. Right. And I'm going to play you some 1, 4, and 5 songs. We're going to talk about them afterwards.
Mixing the medicine, I'm on a pavement.
So we're all in the 1 chord.
A man in a trench coat, badge out laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it laid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the highway, looking for a new friend. A man in a coonskin cap and a big man wants $11 bills. You only got 10.
Back to 1. Right. Okay. And this is part of a whole pile of 1, 4, 5 songs. I'm going to play you a couple more here. They're pretty fun.
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went.
Okay, so there's that one. All right. 1, that's 4, 1. This is 4, 1. This is the 5 chord. 1. 5, 4, 1. Okay, that's another good example. But probably the most interesting of all of these is Robert Johnson, because the standard blues is all 1-4-5-1.
Well, down on my knee. I went to the club. Well, down on my knee.
This is all the one chord.
I went to the club.
This is the 4 chord.
Well, down on my knee.
Back to 1.
Had the Lord of mercy.
5.
Say, come Bob, if you please.
Right. And so the standard blues is almost entirely made up of 1, 4, and 5 chords. So as you can see, this is just an amazing thing to get hold of to help you write songs. There are many other combinations of chords to put together. The notion is that the chords that you choose to put together are the things that give your music structure. So you want a repeating sequence of chords, and many songs are made up of just 4 chords in some combination. And if you choose that combination carefully, you might come up with something absolutely new. But we're going to look at some of the most standard combinations to begin with. We're going to look at the extra chord that gets thrown in is the 6th chord. Now, just before we talk about that, I'm going to show you a 6th chord. So here's 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's our 6th chord, and it's a minor chord. Right? So we have 1, 4, 5, and 6. Right? But you almost never hear them in that combination. Instead, well, let's check these out. This is a 1-6-4-5 chord. Just look at all of the YouTube videos that there are about this progression. It's astounding. And I would suggest that as a tool for teaching yourself, going to YouTube and just looking up a bunch of these songs you couldn't do better than that. It's really quite amazing. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Here's this guy playing several of these songs all in a row. Let's listen to him. And he's just playing them on the bass. Lean on me. Now this is Every Breath You Take. In other words, infinite, right? And that's just using one particular sequence of 1, 4, 6, 5.
No, I ain't your mama, no. I ain't your mama, no. Wake up, rise and shine. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's get to work on time. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No more playing video games. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Things are about to change. Round here, round here. We used to be crazy in love.
Right. So behind you, you hear ba da da dum da dum da dum da dum da dum, and that's 6, 4, 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5, right?
For every song, it's dead simple to write a pop hit.
Just 4?
Yeah, these 4, here. 1, 2, 3, 4 chords.
Sorry, let me get this straight, Chicken Little. What you're trying to say is you can take those 4 chords, repeat them, and pump out every pop song ever. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Yeah, fuck off, Chicken Little.
Just listen. Do you recognise this?
Yeah, that is Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
Great song.
Very original.
There's a few more
song.
that fit. Check it out. My life is brilliant. My love is pure. I saw an angel. Of that I'm sure.
Well, that's just 2 songs that are similar. That's not a big
forever young.
3 songs.
I wanna be forever young. I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. This is the way you left me. I'm not pretending. No love, no hope, no glory, no happy ending. 'Cause you.
Right. So, and on and on and on. He goes on to play, probably a couple dozen songs. And that is the sequence 1, 5, 6, 4. So you can take those 4 chords and move them around in a bunch of different configurations. And as a matter of fact, here's a list of songs using these 4 chords in a whole raft of different combinations. This is a Wikipedia page, and as you can see, the chords are listed over here and the order that they're in, which is quite an amazing little bit of daring do, I dare say. Look at all of these songs. We've only gotten to the B's, and they're like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these songs, all built on 4 simple chords, right, in some combination. So that strikes me as pretty amazing. So I want to pause for a second, ask you guys if you have any questions.
Quick question. Why is it that they use the 1, 5, and the 6 and the 4 in different, like, what is it about those chords?
That's a really good question. So one thing about the 1, 4, and 5 chords, they're the only major chords in the major scale, right? And they, using them, I think, is because they're major, and people really like the sounds of major chords one after the other. But when you get too much of it, it just gets a little bit boring. There are only so many combinations. You can go 1, 4, 5, 1, 5, 4. You're almost always going to start with 1, but not always. You're going to 4, 5, 1, 5, 4, 1, right? Pretty soon you run out of combinations. At least if you add 1 more chord, but it can't be major because otherwise it wouldn't be in the major scale. Then you're going to give yourself another set of options. And because the 5 chord is just below the 6, it seems to naturally move from the 5 to the 6. And then you either go back to the 1 or down to the 4 and then to the 1. So of the various options, you could try, let's let's go to our little keyboard and try a couple of experiments here and see. Okay, so could we make I could do that. Right. So that's 1, 4, 2, 5. Also quite possible, as opposed to I don't know. I kind of almost prefer the second sequence. So it's a very kind of natural and intuitive. What about using a 3 chord? Oh, I don't know how that would work. That didn't sound very good. So I think people just kind of experiment with it and they play what they like, and the 6th chord ends up being used more than anything else. The thing you almost never hear, as a matter of fact, I would say you never hear, is this one. 7 chord. People basically just avoid it. And in fact, the strongest movement in music that exists is this one. That's the very, very basic movement of 5 to 1. It's considered almost at the root of Western music, so much so that people tarted up the 5 chord by adding this note on top. That so you can see it. Right, and so that is combination of the 5 chord and the 7 chord. And so when you put them together, you make something called a 5/7 chord. And that's always wants to move to 5/1, 5/7 to 1. Right. And so all of those other options are kind of built around this inescapable fact of music, at least of Western music, right? But again, people do a bunch of that and then they think, well, that's really nice, but it does get tiresome after a while. So we're going to look for maybe just a little something different. So here's an approach to that. So he's talking about using a flat 7 chord.
The 7th chord usually it's a B flat, right? If you're in C, it's a B diminished, and it sounds like this. Not very nice. This is easily corrected if we just take the root, which is the B, and we move it down to B flat. And the result is a B flat major chord. Of course, it sounds good because it's a major chord, nothing else. The problem is that the root now is a B flat, and of course, if we are playing C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, our B flat will be outside of the scale. That's why it's called a non-diatonic chord. But it sounds really good. See, it sounds pretty good, and it doesn't sound outside, but it is. So if you still try to fit your C, D, E, F, G, A, B scale on it, if one of your B's coincides with the B flat, it will sound really bad. So first of all, you should be careful to modify your C major scale to include a B flat. Okay, and not a B. This one.
So now he's making an interesting point here, and that has to do with how harmony fits against melody. So we've been playing with all of these different chords, and that's interesting. But the question is, how do melodies fit against them? Okay, so let's go back to this keyboard here. And remember that right now, the other thing I'm doing is playing all of these chords in root position, which is like that. The thing I should also tell you is that these three notes, C, E, and G, if they make a C major chord, but this is also a C major chord. Because all of these chords contain those three notes, right? So a C chord is a chord that contains those three notes in any order. Those other versions are called transpositions, inversions of the C major chord. So this is root position, first inversion, second inversion. But in pop, they don't even talk about that. They just play them. So we were talking about how melody would fit against that. If I'm playing a C major chord, and I play something like, and I'm just going to play in the scale. It doesn't sound very good. And why not? Because I'm playing notes in the melody which don't happen in the chord. For example, if I play these notes, right, it sounds way better. So what happens is that the chord you play reinforces the notes in the melody. And that works both ways. You play a chord, you can make up a melody that contains notes in the chord. Or if you're playing a melody and you want to figure out what chord to play behind it, you look at the notes in it. Right. And so in that little melody, which is the beginning of Frère Jacques, I have a C and a D and a G. But in the strong places in the melody, that is the places landing on the beat, I have Frère Jacques, Frère Jacques. And so the chord I'm going to play is going to be influenced by these two notes. So I'm going to tend to play it would be lovely if this keyboard would play in time. Whereas if I played a different chord underneath it, right, it doesn't sound so good. Or at least, you know, by itself, it sounds actually kind of interesting as a development of the C chord. And that is in fact something that a lot of songwriters do. And what we discovered at the beginning, that if you take the same little bit of melody and you change the chord under it, it's almost like a new melody. And I think the really good example of that was the one we were listening to, and I'm gonna share. Six, 4, 5, 1. Okay, there's the melody. See, he sang the same melody. Every breath you take, every step you make, right? but he changed the chord underneath and it sounded like a different melody. And he does this again.
Every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching every single day, every word you say.
Right. So he does a variation of the beginning of the second second verse. Instead of da-dee-da-dee-da. But then he answers it with what he did in the first verse. Right. But in each case, he changes the chord that happened in the first time, and then it sounds like a different melody. I just want to point out that you're not really restricted by all of these. You can actually do something quite different. For example, here's a very unusual one.
When you hear that chord, were you expecting something to follow? Was it this?
Oh, darling, please be.
That's the beauty of chords that are constructed in such a way, although sometimes unexpected, always kind of bring us further into some of our favorite music. In this video, I want to show you some examples of some unexpected chords in popular songs, and that in some cases have a specific harmonic function in the song, and in other cases are there to completely color the song in a different way. Let's check them out.
This is what you get. This is what you get. This is what.
Okay, for our first example, we're going to talk about Karma Police by Radiohead. Now, before we get any further, we're going to have to give.
Anyway, that video has numerous examples of interesting songs with unusual chord progressions, and I would strongly advise just checking it out. It's and I'm going to send you guys these links right now. And what I'd like you to do over the next week is come up with a chord progression yourself, which you find interesting. That is all I have for you today. Next week, we're going to talk about rhythms and what an amazing little journey that is. And the following week, we're going to talk about form, which includes the kind of the cultural context of songs. This is a multidisciplinary job, writing songs. You need to know about words. You need to know about rhythms. You need to know about melodies. You need to know about harmony. You need to know how to play an instrument, although some people write songs without instruments. Do you have any closing comments?
I have a question, Earl. Do you use sort of online, like a fillable music sheet, or you manually put it on directly on the paper, or do you how do you experiment?
Oh, you mean to write music?
Yes.
I use an app called Sibelius, but I also have a music pad, and I have a penchant for getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning and writing something down on a piece of paper. I find when I wake up, I often have a piece of music in my head, and that will cause me to race to the paper and write it down. But then, of course, you have to know how to write it down. My father used to make up melodies, and he eventually had a tape recorder back when there were tape recorders by his bed. And he would, kind of mumble something into his tape recorder and then hope he remembered it in the morning. So this is also a good practice, even if you know nothing about chords or scales, blah blah. Just having something nearby that allows you to sing into it, to remember what it was that was going through your head, is, I believe, it's one of the reasons why I think this whole discipline is important, right? It's your unconscious actually speaking to the world. It's telling you stuff about yourself, and about the way you feel that's important. It's almost like a little muse inside you. So that's why I think songwriting is important.